Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture Centennial Festival. My name is Subha Ahmed. I am an instructor here at the Schomburg Center's Junior Scholars Program, where I've been teaching for the past 17 years. I also lead the spoken word group. And today, in the Poets of Our Time segment, we are really excited to have Mr. George M. Johnson here, the author of, sorry, it was a little feedback, the author of All Boys Aren't Blue. I'm going to briefly read George's biography. And then we'll get started. George will read something from their book, and then we'll have a conversation and open it up for some questions from the members of the audience. Okay, so here we are. George M. Johnson is an award-winning Black non-binary writer, author, and executive producer located in the LA area. They are the New York Times best-selling author of the young adult memoir, All Boys Aren't Blue, discussing their adolescence, growing up as a young Black queer boy in New Jersey through a series of powerful essays. I came to learn in reading a bit more that this novel, being a best-selling novel, is also the second most banned book. First most banned book in the United States. So please give a warm welcome to George M. Johnson. Woo! Talk about making waves.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. I know it's raining, but that's why I love New York and Jersey, because if we were in LA, nobody would be here, because they do not come out when it rains. So I'm just going to read really, really briefly. I tell people all the time I love public speaking, but I hate public reading. It's a very strange thing. It's like I already wrote the book. I don't necessarily want to read it. I also narrated my audiobooks. I just don't like reading it. But this is going to be a very brief, the ending of the chapter that talks about my grandmother. I recall a conversation Nanny and I had later in life, moments after I had officially came out to her when I was about 25. I had always wanted to do it, but I didn't have the full confidence for it until I was older. My fear was that being gay would disappoint them. Although they gave me no reason to think that, the community I lived in was a different world, one around stigma and shaming. So I waited until I felt it was the right time. There I was, crying on the phone, and she was still just as steady as a rock. Firstly, by affirming me in that moment and telling me I didn't need to cry, nor was my being gay an embarrassment to my family. Secondly, by telling me that she always knew, reminding me that I love all my grandkids, and you know that I love you regardless. The final thing she said, though, is what will always stick with me. And when you finally start dating a guy, you still got to do just like all the other grandkids and bring him to meet me before anybody else. Although that day has still not happened, it was a reminder that as different as we are as queer people, some things are simply universal, regardless of sex, gender, or insert the difference here. Elevating Annie won't win any awards from GLAAD. She won't have her picture hung up during Black History Month or make any headlines for operating out of a place of love. But because she saw me, I get the chance to tell everyone about her. And maybe, just maybe, an LGBTQ person's family members or peers will read these words and enough of her spirit will rub off on them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. So, before I ask this question, I just want to say I get to see the real life enactment of what I read about in terms of the fashion. Okay, I remember in the book reading about George going to California And everyone else, his cousins got some new sneakers to go to Disneyland.
Yes.
And George wanted some cowboy boots.
Yes.
And he got the cowboy boots, and I see you still wearing
cowboy
cowboy boots. And I have on cowboy boots. And I love this outfit. So, one of the things that I really appreciated in reading your memoir was your reverence for the women in your life, your mother and Nanny, and I felt like I got to know them, through this story. And I was wondering, first and foremost, how is your family doing? How is everybody? Because I feel like we can't vote. And also, were you always so vocal about your love and adoration of them, or was it something that sort of you grew into expressing?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've ever heard it asked like that. So, one, I did know she was going to ask this question before she knew my actual family and the people that she was talking about were going to be here. So the women in the front row is my mother, my Aunt Sarah, and my Aunt Munch, who are all in the book mentioned in various areas. It's funny because I think I got like different parts of them throughout different parts of my life. Like my mother has always been a constant. Like was always a constant. But like with Aunt Munch, I remember us going to the pizzeria. I think it was called Naples. Was it Naples? By Lewis Avenue? Maybe. I think it was Naples. It was a pizza. Yeah, like it was like, but we would just have our time together. And I was like in high school at the time and like thinking about college and like she was the one who was like giving me all the advice and the things about that. And then like Aunt Sarah was always like the cool aunt with the fast car. She would let us listen to Little Kim. But also like my love for Anita Baker's music came from Aunt Sarah, and it was like, when I was in college and things would get tight, like I could call Aunt Sarah to help out with the light bill or the rent or like any of those things, and like when I just had like life problems, I could always call any of the three of them to just kind of talk through things. I think it kind of grew throughout life. I was with my grandmother a lot, and it's funny, like I guess the older I got, the more I realized like, wow, I was really around her a lot because we would flea market together, we would travel together, like we did a lot of things together, hustling together. Yes, that was hustling together. And so I just think like the adoration was like always there, and it was like I always knew the love was there even when I was still trying to figure out like the parts of myself that I didn't really fully know. But I've always had like a bevy of like primarily black women in my life who have like always been right there. And then it's like, the good thing too is like I have like play aunts, I guess you would say like play cousins. But I don't call them play aunts. They my aunts. I call them aunts. But it's like my mom's best friends, I call aunts. My Aunt Sarah's best friends, I call aunts. Aunt Munch's best, like they were all aunts, right? And so it's been beautiful to like go through this journey, get to where I am today as a public figure, and have like all of them be like the first people in the comments, support and everything. And people now know that they're my family, so Yeah, everybody knows Miss K especially, but my mom is Miss K. But yeah, it's been a beautiful journey.
Thank you for that. So there's a part in the memoir where you talk about Nanny with when it comes to I wrote down your cousin's name, who became Hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hope, yeah.
And how Nanny was very resistant. She's like, I'm not calling her Hope. I'm not doing that. And I thought about like the times that we're living in, and even how you sort of introduced the book and just like the importance of names and all of that. And although Nanny was super affirming and welcoming and all of these things, there was still, this resistance initially. And I thought about, like the grace that you're giving while also affirming yourself, and what advice you would give to other young people who may have family members who, don't accept the transitions or changes and identity choices.
Another good question. I feel like when it came to like Nanny it was like, okay, like, how much further are you going? Like, because I think it just was like, I think like my cousin Hope's transition, it was always accepted. Like it was, nobody had an issue with it. It was just like when the name change came, and I really think it was because Hope put her mother's name in her new name that they were like, wait a minute now. Like I think it was just like, wait, but literally within the same day, she was like, I'm just messing. Like it was literally at a cookout. Like it was within the same day, She was like, I'm just old, so it just take us a minute to learn these things. But what I will say is, that's the importance of making sure that you give people grace and space to just understand things, because we all come from different backgrounds, we all come from different upbringings, and it's like, they grew up, my grandmother and them grew up in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is like now one of the states that has my band, right? Where even though my whole family is there, right? And they are the people who raised me, and that state has taken something that they raised, even though they're from that state, right? And so that's why you have to have grace for the people as they're learning us in identity. And I haven't gotten a chance to really share this story, but there was a moment that happened because I went to church with these two twins, and one of the twins transitioned and now is named Drew. And Drew's family at the church refuse to go to Drew's wedding. And my grandmother was very upset about that and came home and was like, y'all got to get me a train ticket because I'm not letting this baby that I've known since birth at this church not be given away by somebody that they consider family. And so my grandmother went and gave away this trans man as family. When they say, who gives this person away? My grandmother stood up and said, I give this person away. And so I think that talks about like the evolution of where 20, 30 years ago, Hope's transition was like a little jarring to her, but still she was the mother of the church. And she always told us like, well, God is love. So I don't know what y'all are talking about after that part, because the love shouldn't stop because of a person's identity, if they transition or any of that. If God is love, that's where it has to stop. And then y'all got to figure the rest out. And so I think that's kind of like the message I would give to people is like, you got to have a little bit of grace sometimes because people have come from so many different experiences. The second thing that I tell young people is that we're not coming out anymore. We're inviting people in. And so that's the most important thing that you can do is to invite someone in your space, because that gives you more agency to say if a person disrespects your space. I always felt coming out, always felt like I'm doing it not for me as much as I'm doing it for other people who just want the tea. And it's like, to invite someone in, though, means I feel safe enough to invite you in to this space. And so I tell young adults that all the time, like, take agency in it. And it's not going to always be easy because there's going to be some rejection at times. But I've seen people who have rejected their kids, read this book, and then had very open conversations and been able to reconcile through just reading the work. So I just think that I'm grateful that my family is a possibility model, much like Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade. Like, my family gets to be this possibility model that at times I don't even think about, but like when I post them and they see like them supporting me, people in the quotes, like tweets or the comments, are always saying like, it's so beautiful to see a family doing this publicly, because there are so many who don't. So I just kind of think it just takes some grace and some time to kind of figure it out. And, you know, I've been on a long journey of my own identity, but they've been there every step of the way as I've tried to figure it out, even when they may not understand, because there are times I don't understand. Wow. So like I said, having grace with self and having grace for the people who are trying to figure it out with you.
That's beautiful. And shout out to y'all. Yes, it made me think about another part in the book where you talk about when you're going through things, and when you were going through things at your HBCU, which was?
Virginia Union University.
Virginia Union.
The oldest HBCU in the South.
Okay. And while there, you said, like, the thing that you would do is call mom, and what mom would do was pray, and it was your thing to do. You know, that time to connect, and that's, you know, was the centering that happened. And it definitely made me think about my relationship with my son, who's 19, and, you know, having those conversations with him where I feel like I have to pour everything into this moment because it doesn't seem like he's okay right now. And just hearing that, how much that meant for you, and when mom was about to go into surgery, mom saw the look in your eyes and the tears coming down, and she wanted to make sure you were okay, and you recognizing that that's who she's always been. Yeah, I felt that was beautiful.
Yeah, I always find like it's important to kind of like tell those type of stories. Like my mom, she's, again, we call her the iron butterfly because she had 2 brain aneurysms. It was 2015, so a decade ago, and now has her own, aneurysm foundation to help other people, and specifically Black women who deal with aneurysms. But if anybody knows anything about aneurysms, most people don't survive one, and so she had 2. And I mean, even the doctors were shocked because she came out of surgery and like pretty much within a day was talking again and like and rapping in her head.
And rapping.
Yes.
Because your family can rap.
Yes.
I heard that.
Because my mother can
It's
rap.
in the book, y'all. It's in the book. Oh yeah, can we get a sample?
I don't know. We're gonna do a sample today. But yeah, I think that's kind of just like being able to kind of witness like her strength and all of that. It gives me strength to do the things that I need to do. And the part about like calling her in college and like just asking for prayers at times, like I still do it. When I have like really big speeches, I had to give a speech. It's called the CAA Amplify Summit, and there were like a lot of celebrities there, and I was very nervous. It was like Lupita Nyong'o was sitting there, and Dwayne Wade, and all of these very famous people, and I just was extremely nervous. And I called my mother while sitting there in the makeup chair and was like, can we just, pray? Because this is like the biggest speech I've ever had to give in front of this type of room that could really change my life. And we did it. Wow. And then like if my mom's not available, my Aunt Darlene is always available. That's Aunt Sarah's best friend, the prayer warrior. Is who we call my Aunt Darlene. That's my Aunt Sarah's best friend. But I've always had like praying people in my family. And so I also remind people like, because there are a lot of people who are spiritual and not as religious anymore and things. But I always say like, well, for me, it's like as long as if my mom is praying to God and my grandmother's praying to God, then I am acknowledging that whomever your God is somebody that you're praying for to cover me. And so it's like we don't even have to be as divisive, when it comes to spirituality versus religion, because it's like as long as somebody is praying to someone for you, it is okay to acknowledge that that prayer is being bestowed upon you for a reason, from even if it's coming from a God that you may not believe in. You know what I mean? And so I think I've just been able to kind of like have gratitude and just been fortunate that I have so many praying people in my life, right? Because I think I always think about when people say like I'm gonna. Like, oh, I'll pray for you, but then don't. And I'm like,
how you know they ain't pray?
I mean, because they don't. Because they really be like, they just say it, right? I'm gonna pray for you, and they really don't.
My thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, but they really don't. And so it's like that's always been something I've been cognizant of, is the fact that like these people do pray for me, right? And so it's like if I ever say that to someone, like I'm praying for you, I usually will ask, or like if someone's grandmother gets, like I'll ask, what's your grandmother's name? So that they know, like, I'm actually going to sit at my altar and pray for your grandmother. You know what I mean? So I think that it's just power in prayer and power. And I think prayer is manifestation at the end of the day. And I think it's power in manifesting. And gratefully, like, everything I've ever wanted to do so far, I've been able to manifest and do. But it started because I was a church kid. And prayer was a very important thing for me.
Thank you so much. So you can clap. I have so many questions, and I don't want to, take too much time because I also want to open it up for everyone else. But so there are so many different elements of this memoir, and one of the things, well, there were so many things. As I thought about it being directed, the audience being like young adults, and the different like bombs that you drop, historical bombs, I'll say, where I just wondered, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Lies My Teacher Told Me.
I don't think I have.
And so in your memoir, there are certain parts where you point out, for example, Abraham Lincoln and what you were told. So I had the very same experience. I was 11 years old, though. My dad gave me, the first book he ever gave me was Asada. And so in Asada Shakur's book, she actually talks about just that, Abraham Lincoln. And at that time, I was learning about the presidents, and I was like, oh, there's actually right down the block, Lincoln Projects, you'll see Abraham Lincoln statue with 2 little black children. And it's like, this person who's so benevolent, right? And I read it. So as I'm listening and I'm reading this book, and I'm waiting for you to drop it, because you just say, you played Abe Lincoln in the play.
The school play.
Right? And he had the beard and everything. He's like, they thought me a thespian, right? Learning about the presidents and all this. And I wondered, is he going to tell them though? Is he going to share the words? And then you do. And I was like, wow, how was that strategic? Did you have a list of things, a list of statistics? Because you pointed it out for swimming, right? And the statistics on, black children swimming and drowning, and what happened when pools were integrated. You have statistics on HIV and, the queer community. There's so many points, and I just wondered, did you have a list of things where you like, okay, if I'm gonna send some messages, these are the things I want them to know? Like, and how did you interweave it? How did that go about? Because there's so much. There's critical race theory. There's, personal health and wellness, identity. There's so many different facets, so.
I think as I was writing, right, like history is one of my favorite things. Like I wrote another book called Flamboyance on the Harlem Renaissance, about like the 14 main queer people from the Harlem Renaissance. And so I've always been like a big history buff. And the first time I ever went viral, it was talking about racism in swimming. It was after a woman named Simone Manuel. She won the gold medal at the Olympics. It was the first black woman to ever win a gold medal in swimming. And, I talked about, Dorothy Dandridge sticking her toe in a pool and them draining the entire pool back in the 50s. And that's the reason why this woman, almost 60 years later, winning this gold medal is important. And it was a lot of debate online because people really didn't know. And so a lot of people were like, oh, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. And then that's when I started talking about racism in swimming back in 2016, and how after integration of the swimming pools, that was when the first country clubs started showing up in the United States so that white kids could swim at country clubs. And then they cemented in 2,000 public pools so that black kids couldn't learn how to swim. And so that's why like the drowning rate of black kids is like 4 to 5 times that of white children. And I wrote about it though because my cousins, my 2 black cousins who were very wild and rambunctious, taught me how to swim.
That story's in there.
Yes, by throwing me in the deep end of a pool in Atlanta, Georgia at 10 o'clock at night. And yes, and it was at night. It was at night. And making me swim back and forth between the 2 of them for like 2 hours. And that was how I learned to swim with my cousins Raul and Rasul. And so like I just found like that moment, and then like juxtaposing it against like the history of things was important. I think as I started writing the book, it was like there are a lot more historical elements that I need to make sure are in these words. The Abraham Lincoln parts, I think about what's going on now, right? Like there are a lot of protests across the country today in all 50 states. I live in downtown LA. I have called my friends in downtown LA. It is not as bad as what they're showing on television. It's not even close. It is one very small section of LA where this is happening, right? But it's been sensationalized for the media. But what I had to remind people was that, a lot of my rights and a lot of the rights of the people that are in this room today, it didn't come from peaceful protesting. I am all for peaceful protesting. I do think it is important. But I want to be very clear, they were not called the Stonewall peaceful protests, they were called the Stonewall riots, right? That gave us all, the LGBTQ people, their rights, right? Nat Turner's protest was not the peaceful protest of Nat Turner. It was a slave rebellion where they killed everybody in that town, which then shifted how laws were created and shifted how enslaved people, it created a fear, like a real fear, like, oh, wait, if they can do this, now we got to kind of change systems, right? And so that's why I write about the history of things, because sometimes it can get so whitewashed or so erased so easily by now, right? Like, because it's like the iteration of it. So it's like, if I put it in a book, then it's enshrined. And so that's why, even though I'm writing from personal experience, I still also make sure that there's some historical accuracy to the things that I'm putting in there that defined why my experience had to look that way.
And I think you did that masterfully.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask one more question so that I can open it up to the audience. I put a shout out in the beginning. I said, woo, they told them how to use the slurs in the beginning of the book, right? If they're not kinfolk. Yeah, I thought that was so, like, so important. Like, so just to let you know, I use these terms. You shouldn't. Yes, that was great. Okay, so I think the last question, in writing your memoir and creating a space of, I felt it was creating a space of reflection for youth. Because of the way it's written, it goes through, death, abuse, love, friendship, identity, all of these different things that you went through and shared your personal experiences with. I know you said it was to give a model to and give a voice to stories that you didn't hear. But were you also creating like a therapeutic space to be able to reflect on these things, like, and relate back to like these times for yourself and for the young people that you in your audience?
Yeah, but I don't think I intended for that to be what it was, and I think it turned out that that's what it was. And I think once I got to the end of the book and started, because the book's been out for 5 years now, and so it's like once I have met so many people and started kind of talking to people about how the book was making them feel and changing their lives and like activating certain things they hadn't thought about, I kind of realized that the book actually wasn't written by like 33-year-old me. It was written by 5-year-old me and 10-year-old me and 15-year-old me that didn't have the words to kind of express and say what I was feeling. And so ultimately, I think why the book resonates so popularly with an adult crowd, because it's doing very well in YA, and young adults have loved it. But there are a lot of adults in their 50s, 60s, 70s who read the book and are changed by it, is because the book speaks to everybody's inner child. Because we all have inner children in us that, I think we go through life healing parts of the inner child with certain things. And I just think like, I didn't smile a lot, but it just, when I was growing up, I didn't smile a whole lot. But that was something that I had to realize was like, oh, that's attached to this thing from childhood. And so I have to fix it. Like, that's the only way to kind of move past this particular trauma of this thing from childhood is to fix it. But it just reminded me of like so many things that we do as adults at times. We don't necessarily remember why we do them as adults. And then someone's like, well, remember when you was 8? Mommy popped you on the hand for doing that, and then you stopped doing it forever. And then it's like, so that's why you don't go out of back? Like, or like, that's why I don't like, like it'll be like interesting things like, oh, I don't like this type of ice cream, or I don't like this type of thing. And you're like, well, where did that come from? And it's like, oh, you know what? That actually came from a childhood thing, like a moment that happened that wasn't fully explained to me.
Right.
And so I just took that, if I do this thing, I might get hit. So I stopped doing this thing. And now even as an adult, I don't do this thing because there's still something in the back of my mind that says, if you do this thing, you're going to get hit. And so I think that's really what the book became. It started speaking to like inner child things for so many people that allowed them to kind of be able to process them and also move forward with them. There's something called the Hurston Walker test, based on Zora Hurston and Alice Walker. And essentially what it says is, if Black art takes you to a place of trauma, it must also give you the solve to heal your wounds. And so I think that was my biggest goal with the book, was like not leaving people in my trauma. And not leaving people in their own trauma, like trying to give them pathways to kind of navigate that and make their way through it. And I'll just close by saying, like, I always think about when I do that, I always think about like the movie Set It Off. Great movie, but as a kid, I always felt sad at the
Yeah.
end, right? That they got killed, and like I was like, oh, I wanted all of them to make it. I wanted all of them to make it. But realistically, now I understand that that was a Hearst and Walker test, and that it was great cinema because even though it showed that most times the state will win, Jada Pinkett getting away was Asada Shakur's story of also beating the state and getting away. Angela Davis was public enemy number one, and she survived the state as well. So I now look at that as like, oh, you know what? It took us to that place of trauma, but this was the journey that said there can be an alternate ending. And so I just hope that the book gives people that they can have an alternate ending that isn't always what the most typical narrative is for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes. So before we close, I wanted to give an opportunity for maybe one question from the audience. And then after, George will be in the Langston Hughes lobby signing books, which you can also purchase at the bookstore. And then we'll be preparing for our next reading, which will take place right here immediately following. So does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask before we close?
I don't have a question, but I just have a quote or a statement, quote for myself. Okay. I bumped into him when I was coming in, true, right?
Yes.
Never
Yep.
saw him before in my life. And I'm like, wait, because he was dressed so nice. I'm like, where's the fashion show? I'm like, where was I was ready. I was that ready. And so we talked like a little bit. And I said, you go in, King, let me hold the door for you. You go and use your entrance. And my daughter said, I told her, she might be coming in, so I'm going to try to make it quick. I'm outside, and I'm talking to this beautiful lady in a brown over there. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to see him. She's like, that's my son. So, it's just like a full fold thing for me. And my daughter is in the life, so, this is touching me in every area. And you just keep doing your thing.
Thank you.
Just keep supporting me.
Thank you.
I love you all.
Thank you all so much for coming, for listening, for sharing. And thank you so much,
Thank
George.
you.
It's been a pleasure
Yes.
and an honor. And you keep continuing to do the incredible work that you're doing, the impact that you're making.
My wet daughter.
Okay, and thank you again for all of your work and for being here at the Schomburg Center.